Hi,
Maria from Oliver.
hi, Maria.
Lupe from Chicago.
Hey, Lupe. This is Brian. We're going to get started in a couple minutes here.
Okay. Brian, what do you say we go ahead and get started? It's about 5 after.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this morning for our very last webinar. I've got Dr. Suzanne Carter here with me. She's the director of Neeley's Executive MBA Program here at TCU, and she's going to talk with you about implementing strategic change, which I think is a really great capstone to our entire program. Overall, I hope that this program has been valuable to you all and that you have gotten some very useful information and skills out of it. And we're just very, very, very happy to have had the opportunity to work with all of you. I'll hand it over to Brian, who's got a couple of notes, and then we'll get started.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Again, I wanted to echo those sentiments. It's been a really great experience working with TCU. I think it's really given us an opportunity to step back and take a look at how we can approach strategy across the network, not only at SARE National, but in terms of what the group's trying to accomplish moving forward. We do have plans for year 3 in the works, so stay tuned for more information. We hope to continue the program in 2015, so we're looking at different options. I want to welcome any suggestions, feedback, and future program recommendations from the group that can help us to put together the most relevant program possible for next year or future years. The key, now that we're wrapping up the second year of the SARE Executive Leadership Institute, is now that everyone completes the program exit questionnaire promptly, which will be sent out within the next couple of days following today's webinar. This is really important in terms of our reporting and our program performance evaluation for American Express, who so graciously funded this program, and our ability to show comprehensive reporting across everyone that participated will go a long way in their eyes. And I just wanted to thank all of the affiliate partners and the SARE National staff for their earnest participation, and look forward to future initiatives involving executive leadership moving forward. At this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Carter.
Brian. It's good to be with the group. I thought I'd start just a little bit by spending a little bit of time letting you know my background so you know where I'm coming from. So I am the Executive Director of the EMBA program here at TCU. We have students that have average age about 38 to 40 and managerial experience of 9 to 10 years in the classroom. So we get some really very good discussions going on in the classroom. Very diverse set of students from Fortune 500 companies to entrepreneurs that run their own business all the way to not-for-profits. And I've done a lot of work with local organizations here in the not-for-profit sector here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Before I was here at TCU, I taught at Notre Dame and also did some consulting work with not-for-profits there as well. So I'm looking forward to talking with you today. I'm a professor of strategy, and that is my background. Typically, I teach strategy classes, and a very, very important element of strategy is strategic leadership. So what I wanted to start my discussion with you all today about is about how we can impact people as leaders in terms of directing strategy. Because trying to develop a strategy and then changing people's mindset, in my mind, is really the most important thing to get any kind of change implemented. So with that in mind, and if anyone has any questions or comments, just go ahead and add those to the chat list or speak up, and we will have those discussions. So as I said, I'm going to start my focus on strategic leadership, and then we'll talk about implementing strategic change. So the first thing I'd like you to think about is what kind of leader you are. It's interesting because I know if you read any of the business press, you see all kinds of different terms. You see transformational leaders, charismatic leaders, transactional leaders. I've written a paper kind of summarizing all of the work that academics have done on this for about 30 years. There's lots of buzzwords out there. Academics are, just as responsible for that as anyone else. But the big question is, what does it mean to be one type of leader or another? And what I try to push with my students is to consider how to be a strategic leader. And when I'm asking about leadership, I'm asking how you get your work done, how you accomplish work through others, and what it is you spend most of your time on. So, are you the kind of leader who spends a lot of time putting out fires? Sometimes we all being someone who spends most of my time teaching strategy, we of course talk about strategic plans. And the problem with a lot of strategic plans is they become, they're one of those things that you kind of write at a retreat, and maybe every 3 to 5 years you get the opportunity to revise them, and you stick them in the back of your desk drawer, and then you forget about them because so many day-to-day things have to happen that you end up fighting fires. And most people find themselves in that situation where they're spending the vast majority of their time doing tactical things that may or may not have anything to do with where you want your organization to go. Of course, teaching MBA students, I'm often interested in seeing this. It is very typical of the standard MBA student to get bogged down in the analysis side of things and be unwilling to implement things. When I was at Notre Dame, one of the things I did was I judged a business plan competition. And during those competitions, we would find that undergraduate students would do a better job with doing a more comprehensive business plan than a typical MBA student. MBA projects would consist a lot of financial data and a lot of analysis and very little attention to the people side of things and actually getting things implemented. And that's where they got bogged down because they had so many tools and frameworks that they weren't able to get away from that analysis aspect of things and get to the implementation side. And this is not to say that you sit in implementation and just fight fires, but you have to move to be more agile and know when you need to be where. What I encourage people to think about becoming is a strategic leader, a leader who is agile, and knows enough that they know when to be what. So taking their eye off of those fires in order to be strategic in the fires that you need to put out is a very, very important skill to have. So what we're going to talk about today is your ability to recognize when you need to wear different hats. And this is all about how you can implement your strategy and make a strategic change that's going to be successful for your organization. This is a very, what I would call a big picture chart. It really is a great way to think about how your organization should function. As you can see, it starts with a mission and vision, which is all of you have some sense of what that is at your organizational level. That is the fundamental purpose and the set of values that you work for, the reason for your existence, and what you try to achieve. Goals and objectives then are particular definable things that you want to reach in the short and long term to help meet that mission and vision. The thing that comes from there is strategy, and strategy is how. So the first part, the vision and goals and objectives, is all about why you exist and why you are operating the way you are. Strategy is about what you want to accomplish or how you want to accomplish that. It allows you to meet those goals and objectives. And the strategic analysis side of the puzzle, which we're not going to be able to talk too much about today, is the internal resources and capabilities that you have within your organization. You know, the people that you work with, the assets that you own, the community that you're involved with, and the external environment that you're faced with, the competitors that are in your area, some of the other external forces such as, you know, the macro environment, government regulations, things like that. So all of those things need to fall into your understanding of how you're going to achieve your vision of your organization. So those things are very, very important in determining what the strategy of your organization is. The last part of this puzzle, of course, is the implementation side of things. And because most of us, as managers and leaders, get stuck in the how to implement the vision and strategy of the organization, because most of us find ourselves not knowing how to implement without spending a whole lot of time fighting fires that are not relevant to our vision. That's where I want to spend our focus today. And so as you can see, the implementation side of things involves several different areas that you all are very familiar with. The structure of your organizations, the processes, rewards, your human resources, your people, and the activities that you do, etc., and choices that you make. So these are the things we're going to talk about in terms of how you wear various hats and how you get your strategy and your vision implemented. So the key thing to me, if you were to ask me one thing that I would encourage you to do to implement strategic change effectively, it would be consistent. You have to have consistency in several different elements in order to be able to make change effectively. We're going to talk, and one of the easiest ways to think about how to be strategic is to think about how not to be strategic. So I'm going to spend the first half of our discussion here talking about examples of situations that people have gotten in that have led them to be not strategic in nature and not consistent. And then when we're finished with that, then I'll give you basically a case study on an organization that has been very, very effective at leading a successful growth of a company. And the leader who was behind all of that was someone who understood the ability to be consistent across the board. So I'm going to start by talking about vision. What happens when you don't communicate a vision effectively? The biggest thing that happens is there's confusion. There's confusion not just among your own employees, but there's confusion among stakeholders, external stakeholders to your organization. And that confusion is going to basically wreak havoc on your ability to make any kind of changes effectively. So one of the best examples that I have seen with this issue of not being able to effectively communicate vision is what you need to do to kind of fix that is, I see this happen quite frequently with consulting work that I do, that an organization, not-for-profit organizations, in this example, may have a national vision that may run counter to what a regional or a local group wants to achieve. And if you have a situation like that, it it's a lot of confusion. And so you have your board that is wanting to go in one direction, or perhaps the national vision is suggesting you should go in another direction. And trying to pull people into going in the same direction is very, very difficult. In those circumstances, and when I've seen this in the past, typically it's really important for the local chapters to say, to demonstrate both to the national level and to their own constituents why their own vision or how their own vision fits in with the national vision, so that everybody sees that they're going in the same direction. So it doesn't have to be a complete agreement, but if it gets you to the ultimate goal, then it can be a subset of that. Recognizing what your local vision is, though, is very, very important, and communicating that is really essential. So that's issue number one. Second thing I want you to think about is what happens if you don't have a strategy that's consistent with that vision. And when I'm talking about, you're going to have chaos because people are not going to do anything that's going to ultimately help your organization. When I'm talking about strategy, one of the things that I want you to understand is you can think about strategy as being, I'll just lay it out quickly for you. There's basically 5 things that you can think about strategically. What market segments are we trying to focus on? What customer segment groups are most important to us? The second thing is the vehicles. How are we going to get the growth that we want or the success that we want? Is it through partnering with local communities, or is it through grants with the national government, or how is it that we're going to achieve that? How is it that we're going to be different? That's number 3. What is our differentiation strategy? Because you need to be unique in your market, or you're going to have to be competitive to such an extent that it's not going to allow you to be very successful. The fourth thing is, what is the speed and sequence of your initiatives? How quickly do you want to move? How important is it to sequence certain events over others? So that strategy element is very, very important. And then finally, how can you sustain yourself? What is it about your organization that is going to allow you to continue to be successful over the long term? So those 5 elements have to be in alignment, and they have to address the vision of your organization. If you can't figure that out, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And in the for-profit arena, we talk about two basic differentiation strategies in terms of strategic models. One is the low-cost model, which is trying to do everything as efficiently as possible, and being basically the low-cost leader in your area. And, you know, imagine Walmart, a great example of that. On the other hand, you can be very, very successful with a premium strategy, one that is giving your customers the best of the best. But you can't be successful doing both. So you need to decide which of those strategies is best going to help you to achieve it. The third thing I wanted to mention is incentives. I all understand this concept of incentives. Your employees very, very much appreciate incentives. But if you give them the wrong incentives, you're going to get inertia. So giving incentives that lead to successful strategies and achievement of your vision is very, very important. And understanding that is really, really key. I once worked for an organization, a company, and when I was working for that company, I was an internal auditor. We did operational audits. So one of the things we saw in those operational audits, we frequently saw it actually, is that there would be a difference in incentive structure for the marketing people as compared to the operations people. Typically, operations folks would be given incentive bonuses for safety and for being efficient in their routes, and the marketing people would be paid for ability to increase revenue. And often those two things were at odds with one another. And until the organization as a whole understood where the organization was trying to get, those incentives did not help the organization get to where they needed to be because they were at odds. So you have to think holistically in terms of your incentive structure to make that effective. The fourth thing I wanted to mention is lack of skills. And you all probably have seen this before. If you're in a situation where your employees lack the skills that are needed, you're going to have a lot of stress in your environment. One of the greatest examples I have of this, I've read about this and find it quite fascinating, is that IBM in its early days had Tom Watson was running the show at the time. And when, I don't know if you know this, but IBM, when they first started, they were basically a time clock company. You would punch your time when you came in and punch your time when you came out, and that they manufactured these mechanical time clocks. And as they grew, they realized that this was not the way of the future. And Tom Watson saw that there was a possibility for electric machinery, the wave of the future was computers. He knew that that was going to eventually impact their business. And so in order to be effective, he basically ended up firing hundreds of mechanical engineers and brought in hundreds of electrical engineers because they were the wave of the future. He couldn't use the resources he had in the past because those individuals didn't have the skills that were necessary to compete in the future. So it's very important that you match the skills of your employees with the needs of your organization. And if you've got somebody in the wrong position, you need to think about where it is you can get them in the right position. In terms of structure, it's very, very important to think about how your organization is structured and the decision-making rights of the individuals that are there. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of conflict. One of the consulting projects that I did when I was at Notre Dame was I worked with a ballet company. And the way that particular organization was structured was they had an artistic director and they had basically a managing director, an operations director. Well, the artistic director had a vision that was very different from the operations director. But the problem with that, and that's not all that uncommon, but the problem with that is they were both in charge. There was no structure that gave one person more priority over the direction of the organization than the other. And the board didn't know how to handle that at all, because the artistic director was very, very excited about making this ballet company the most highly differentiated, premium ballet company in the region. And so she was very okay with bringing in a very select group of ballet dancers. On the other hand, the operating director had a very different vision for the ballet company. She wanted it to be expansive and grow, and she wanted lots and lots of ballet dancers in their company. And it was at odds with the artistic director's view. And so the board was saying, what do we do about this? Because they're in major conflict. The issue of decision-making then had to reside with one or the other, and that may have meant that they lose one, but it was very critical for them to come up with a solution to that. And the final thing that we want to make sure doesn't happen is we want to make sure that you don't have frustration. And, you know, I've put resources on the end of this list on purpose. I think it's very, very important to not even consider resources in the early stages of your vision setting and your strategy setting, because it can lead you down a path that isn't very exciting. I think it's really important to come up with a strategy and a vision outside of the box of resources that you put yourself in every day. If you have limited resources, you'll get frustrated. So if you have the finance and accounting people, who, by the way, are fabulous, you need to have them. I was once an accountant. But if you have them in the room, you need to ask them to kind of be quiet when you're talking about vision and strategy, and then let them talk later and say, okay, now how do we achieve those things given our resources? If you don't have the right resources, you get a lot of frustration. And an example of this, you know, not too long ago, many of us were trying to sign up for the health insurance through Obamacare online, and if you remember, the resources at the time were pretty pitiful, and no one was able to actually get to the website and apply appropriately. And so until they resolved that problem, there was lots of frustration. So those are the things that are going to lead to ineffective strategic change. Let's move on from this and talk about how we might get successful strategic change. Many different things, hats to wear. As I mentioned, I'll just go through an example that probably many of you are very familiar with. Hang on.
Technical difficulties, y'all. Let me get this going again.
So I'm going to give you an example of term that many of you may hate, many of you may love. You all have opinions on it, I suspect, but I'm certain you've all heard of it. And the company we're going to talk about right now is Walmart. The reason I want to talk about Walmart is because Sam Walton was an incredible visionary, and he was also capable of understanding the importance of consistency. And even though he passed away, his company continued to have a very, very consistent strategy that has led it to be basically the #1 retailer in the world, probably beyond any of Sam Walton's wildest imagination. But it came from his ability to understand that consistency was so important. So his vision early on was really to develop a company that would help blue-collar workers have branded products at low prices, as you all know, every day. That was his vision. So how was he going to achieve that? He stuck with the strategy of low cost, which meant that everything that the company did revolved around trying to achieve lower costs than other competitors. That's why many of us are a little bit hesitant to say that we like Walmart, because we know that they aren't all that great to their vendors. They force them into reducing their own costs, but ultimately that helps their suppliers. We know that they don't pay the best wages, but ultimately that helps them with their consistent strategy of having low prices for those people and their key customers who come and shop for them every day. And it's the low pricing that they give that makes all of us feel quite content walking into Walmart and paying the price for something, if that's what we're looking for, is low prices every day. So that strategy for him was very effective. It permeated his organization. He built the organization by establishing hubs, so that, and he bought his own trucks, and he said, I will build a number of Walmarts around a particular warehouse, and that reduced transportation costs. And those types of things made him differentiated from his competitors, from the Kmarts, and even the Targets, and the Sears, and other competitors that he was fighting against. And that allowed him to be more successful. It gave them organization, and it allowed everyone to understand what was important, and what direction the organization should go in order to achieve that vision. One of the great things that Sam had going for him was he was an incredible motivator, and he did give incentives. If you happen to live in Bentonville, Arkansas, you had Saturday sessions that everybody attended, and they were basically pep rallies for Walmart, and it really brought energy into the company. But it wasn't just these kind of internal incentives. He also gave people shares in the company. So there's lots of Walmart millionaires out there because of his original intention to build the vision of his organization and help his employees. Walmart is known for internal, for building people up from the ground up and promoting internally. It's not very common to bring people on at high top management levels unless they've had a lot of experience in the company. He was very good at finding people for the right jobs. and it instilled confidence in the employees. So he knew when to wear that mobilizer hat. Also, in terms of the structure of the organization, when I talked about how he structured the warehouses, that was part of this. One of the other things that he has put in place, which is cooperation at the corporate level in terms of the low-cost aspect of things, is he has put in and allowed employees to be a part of reducing costs at Walmart. And I'll give you a couple. Imagine that you're an employee and you're sitting in your break room. So this is what happened with one part, and he's got in his mind, I know that the organization values efficiency and low cost. And he's sitting there and he's watching some people use the vending machine in the break room. Well, the vending machine is lit up and it's making noises and doing all kinds of things that, you know, singing songs. And he's thinking, wow, I wonder how much energy that actually uses up. And I wonder how many vending machines Walmart has in all of their various locations. And I wonder how much money we spend on the light bulbs that go in the vending machine. And he actually suggested to the company that they just take the light bulbs out of those vending machines because they were unnecessary. They were just added, you know, branding value or something. And they took him up on it, and it saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of the next several years. So just understanding that's how important this is. Another thing was there was an employee who wanted to add value in some respects to his department, and he was working in the it was in a Sam's Club, and he was working in the food area, and he figured out that, and they said, okay, you can do, I don't know what it was that he was doing, but he wanted to add something that would have cost something. And they said, you can do it if you can figure out how you can reduce costs elsewhere. So he was able to reduce costs enough for their department by changing the length of the straws from, you know, just by an inch. And that was able to give him the money that he needed. So this is the mindset of the employees, because again, they understand the vision of the organization, ultimately to give the lowest price of high quality branded products to its customers, and you do that through reducing costs. So he did an incredible job at enabling. Okay, next thing, allocating creates action, and that whole issue of bringing action is really, really important. So allocating resources properly is critical. He did a really good job of allocating those resources, getting them to the proper places, and now today they're allocating resources differently. They're recognizing that that people don't necessarily like the big box stores as much, and so they're allocating their resources towards smaller scale, and that is really kind of creating that action that's necessary to move them to the next step, because in essence, as most of you know, Walmart is close to its threshold in terms of customer base here in the U.S., and it's moving globally. So the allocation of resources is an ever-changing thing, but that's the only way that they can be successful in moving forward. So to kind of summarize all of this, you have to know what hats to wear when, and you have to see this big picture every day. The only way you're going to avoid spending that 70% of your time fighting fires and you go home at night and think, what did I accomplish today? The only way you're going to change that mindset is if you tie the tactics that you're doing on a day-to-day basis with the strategies and the vision of the organization. And that's going to require you as a leader to step away. And if you're able to do that, then you can get your employees to understand too, because then you can communicate that vision and why it is they're trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve. And if what they're doing is not in alignment with where your organization needs to go, then perhaps that particular action you shouldn't be spending time on. So it's very, very important to consider that. The last thing I would like to say is it really is all about leadership, and leadership is getting people to do better and more than they thought they were capable of doing. So as Sam Walton says, outstanding leaders go out of their way to boost the self-esteem of their personnel. If people believe in themselves, it's amazing what they accomplish. And if you're going to be that leader who gets people to change the way they're doing things, to move your organization forward, then you have to think about the people that you're working with, because that's what it's all about. Strategy in the back of your desk is not going to get the job done. Buy into your vision and move forward is the way you're going to be a successful leader and make a positive strategy. And that is the end of my discussion here. If we've got 10 minutes left, and I am happy to take questions. Or comments, for that matter.
I had one question.
From Chicago, I think what you said hits on target with what's going on here. And what I struggle with, honestly, is finding that time to step away so I'm not the one putting out fires and yet keeping everybody really motivated. But it's important to make sure that you carve the space out, because you're right, otherwise it gets confusing.
Yeah, motivation.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And I would, you said carve the time out. I absolutely recommend that you put time on your calendar. Because if you don't, then it gets lost in the shuffle. And when you do, just make sure that you are reconnected with what it is you're doing. So think strategically, but don't do that in a box. You have to think back to impact action on a day-to-day basis. Anyone else?
About your work with other not-for-profits and how strategy has enabled one of those organizations to really achieve some of their goals.
So one of the things that I've done here at TCU is I've designed a class on social enterprise. And social enterprise, I'm sure you all know, is basically well, it can be an entire spectrum of things, but usually most social enterprises fit within not-for-profit organizations, and their goal is to bring in revenue to the organization to help achieve the vision of the organization. Well, some of the work that I've done with not-for-profit in the Dallas-Fort Worth area is kind of look at the ultimate vision of the social enterprise and whether or not that impacts the vision of the organization. So you try to achieve a consistency there. Sometimes it's kind of serendipitous that you fall into some kind of revenue generating opportunity that has nothing to do with the vision of the not-for-profit. And in those cases, it's okay to continue. But usually if you have a social enterprise that is aligned with the organization's mission as well, then those tend to be really effective, and you get a lot more traction in your community if you can link the two of those together. So that's one of the things that I work on with groups.
Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Alrighty, well, thank you all again so very much for taking the time out of your mornings to attend today's webinar. Based on some of the comments that I'm seeing in the thread, it looks like this was a valuable presentation for you, and we're always happy to get that feedback. Overall, thank you all for participating in this year's Executive Leadership Institute with SARE and TCU. It's truly been a pleasure. And I look forward to sending out a recap of today's presentation. And for those of you who are seeking your certificate, you'll also see an attachment with the discussion questions. Thank you all again, and I will be in touch. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.